being here. So, yes, I'm David. I teach over in the film department in Trinity and I handle the MPhil writing for games module. So, games, that's where we are with this. So, this is just a little bit of a look at the Shin Megami Tensei series, very big RPG brand in Japan, and looking at like the way in which it utilizes demons from across the globe. So without further ado, we'll get this set up. So the main major series is called Shin Megami Tensei. Prior to this, the first origins of this was a book called Megami, Digital Devil Story Megami Tensei. They were a series of novels written by a fellow called Aya Nishitani. The original novel concerns a young Japanese boy who finds out that a computer is the perfect catalyst for summoning demons, and chaos ensues. So it's through the modern device that we communicate then with demons on the other side. The original Megami Tensei, without the Shin, the original series came out in 1987. There were two versions of that game developed with the same name, but they were the same year, but actually completely different. A PC, effectively a computer version, and a console version on the Famicom, the Nintendo system. The computer version was a top-down game similar to, if anyone's played it, to Gauntlet, a very simple game where you navigate the character through a large maze and just kill the monsters as you go along. The other Nintendo one that set really the path of the game going forward is a dungeon crawler where you're walking in first person, you come across monsters, you kill them, and gain experience and get stronger. Now, one of the big things that's quite different about the Megami Tensei series, and one thing from the Nintendo version that came along and became very popular, is that when you encounter demons in the game, you have a possibility of recruiting them, and that's how you survive in the game. You find demons that are strong, and you try and you get them in combat, you try and talk to them, try and reason with them, and get them to come to your side. This will hopefully, so I would imagine in this learned room, there will be passing familiarity with Pokemon. And it's a game in which like you find all sorts of different animals and you throw a Pokeball at them and you catch them. And then they're yours to use in battle. This was here first. This came first. It's like Pokemon largely has sort of taken some of the main models here, except the gotta catch them all here is the Ars Goetia being the sort of major difference. You can see some little examples here of like a moment where, you know, instead of attacking, you can like stop and say, you know, ask them how they're doing. It's like, what kind meat you like? Beef, pork, chicken, human can be one of your possible responses. What fun to destroy? Buildings, nature, the social order, or I'd rather create. So there's this opportunity is like where there's a communication with demons and you're like saying, come on, give me a hand here, help me out. There is also a mechanic that's called fusion, where you take two different demons, you put them together and they make something else as well. And there's like a whole elaborate system in that that's sort of roughly based on the tarot. I'll get into it right now. This is a very large series that I want to emphasize. It is starting to come out in the West. A lot of people will be more familiar with Persona 5, a game which, if you go out to the stores now, you'll find on the shelf somewhere. It's very popular. Persona 5 is a spin-off from the Shin Megami Tensei series. The full name is Shin Megami Tensei Persona 5. So it's like there's a lot of spin-offs that you may be more familiar with. Persona is the big one, Devil Survivor, Devil Summoner, and Persona Revelations. It took a while to come over to the West, and the first thing that West got was this spin-off Persona in 1996 as well. What really kind of is significant here is that mythology is the metaphor in which we see a kind of a digital frontier. It's like we are using the technology of the future to bring back the atavistic past of the demon. Kind of interesting. So some nice pictures here with Trinity. It's like we've got Cuchulainn to begin with, some interesting kind of depictions of them. Asherah, which is like referred to, goddess of fertility, questionably referred to in the Bible itself. Some believe this the controversially as God's wife as well, but quite an obscure figure. You also have Pazuzu up here, and then for Japan itself, a little bit of Japan's own representation, the Yamata no Orochi, which is not dissimilar from a hydra, a multi-headed evil dragon that's trouble for everyone. To continue that a little bit more, you have this Mad Max character on the left, Hecate, goddess, Greek / Egyptian goddess of doorways, of liminal space. You have this cheerful little fellow as Halphus. They can't be all bad if they look so fancy. And you also have one of my favorites here is not actually like a literal demon, but Pascaru or Pascal, who is a dog character that you meet in the first Shin Megami Tensei game. And I think it's a cute little reference because it's Pascal is referencing both the Pascal's wager, the mathematician, but also the programming language of Pascal. So it's a neat little double meaning for the kind of thematic aims of this game series. Things that's like quite interesting about this is that we might look at this and say, okay, well, this is like you know, they're just sort of taking this on loan from international cultures. The Vitala is in here as well. I should note in the game too. It's like all sorts. It's a big compendium of demons and deities. But what happens here is that rather than being like a kind of simplistic appropriation, you know, they found the pictures of it somewhere and it's been folded into the mythology of the game. There's a very specific instance of a secret battle with Hecate, which you can have in the game, but you fight Hecate in Yetzirah on the Sephiroth on the world tree, but the Yetzirah is placed in a branch in an intersecting point, which is the kind of place that Hecate would be. So it's this remix of like suddenly this Greek figure just dropped and transposed now into the Sephiroth, and just sort of casually these elements have been remixed. The interview here is important. Why is Hecate in Yetzirah? She's a three-faced god. She's associated with crossroads, connects the town of Yesod to the three other areas in the abyss through the Yetzirah corridor. So we're getting in very esoteric here. Impressive symbolism. The number of people who discover and understand that is really small. Narisawa says we should let them know when they notice it. Kaneko, who is the artist for the game series, or at least in the early stages, the abyss is portrayed in so many ways. So we have to come up with our interpretations from now on too. That's a really universal portrayal, for example. If we were to talk from a more unitary point of view, it's got a dual nature and it exists in contrast with one's individuality. It is also everyone's and anyone's world. So that seems to be an interesting kind of mission statement for what they're attempting to accomplish with the games. Important to note as well that the novelist who wrote the original digital devil stories novels back in the day is writing the story for these games, and the legacy of these game series is like from 87 till now is still continuing. Tons of titles. So the apocalypse is a big deal in this, and again, the apocalypse mediated by technology. The first Shin Megami Tensei is quite interesting in that basically demons start turning up all over the place. It's like people are someone uses the wrong computer program, demons are everywhere. And what occurs quite specifically is that there is a conflict here between the Japanese and the US occupying forces. There is a theological schism about what a demon is, because to the Americans, they see a demon and they're like, oh, well, that's evil. I'm going to get rid of this. It's like, you know, the demons and devils, they're bad. The Japanese, specifically the JSDF, the Japanese Self-Defense Force, see demons and they're like, these are the spirits of our ancestors who are angry about the unfulfilled promise of an imperial Japan. And it's like this sets US and Japanese forces immediately into antagonism with each other. And it's what's interesting is that they're both kind of utilizing demons effectively to create this proxy war between US and Japanese forces within Tokyo. And what's even worse in a sense is that, like in the first game, the main character is sort of taken away and protected for a period because the nukes drop as part of this conflict and the world is almost completely destroyed. And even then, the Japanese and US forces have effectively formed into a messianic cult versus a devil worshipping cult, and the animosity of the US-Japan conflict still exists when there's nobody left to fight that conflict. So it's like there seems to be quite a severe message. Also, this is the leader of the JSDF, The reason I put him in there is also he's a very close, you may recognize the close likeness for Yukio Mishima, as well as the famous novelist who committed harakiri. It was after a failed coup in real life many decades ago. Shin Megami Tensei II, the player is starts off as a pit fighter, again, another kind of Mad Max scenario world, but then it turns out you get kind of bailed out of this pit fighting gladiatorial lifestyle because it turns out you're a genetically modified clone of the Messiah. In Shin Megami Tensei III, you're, the main character is turned into a demi-fiend after witnessing a kind of conception in which a new world is born inside the existing one. So it's a lot of destruction. The world's getting wiped over and over again. So what's important about this series, and one thing I'd like to touch on now, is that there are 3 pathways in general through these games. And they're kind of measured by the player's response to dilemmas or character interactions. And they're ideologically based. It's not good and bad as moral choices are often positioned, but they are ideological choices: law, order, law, chaos, and neutral. And law is like you're welcoming God back into the world, and everyone becomes an angel. Sin is impossible, and it's just a kind of serene equilibrium forever. Chaos is you bring in Lucifer, and it's might makes right. Kind of antinomianism, it's like the expunging of God from the world to kind of let people kind of revel in chaos. And neutral is emancipation, is mankind's like self-determinant emancipation from the cosmos. They're like, it's me, you know, it's putting humans back on the map. I would note here as well that the neutral ending, in which there's like this emancipation both from the devils and the divine, is difficult to get. It's a bit harder to do. And this is contingent, where you go in the game is contingent on player behavior. Maybe the way to kind of visualize this is your answers to dilemmas in the game has the game like ticking a little sheet in terms of whether you're responding to law or to chaos or to neutrality, and it tallies it up towards the sort of denouement of the game, and then sort of firmly sets your path, your destiny onwards. Representatives of these paths, you have Stephen, the more complicated one, and again, very close likeness to Stephen Hawking. He created the demon summoning program, which people use as computers to bring about demons. He is really strongly represents the innovation of science and the path of neutrality. You have a Jehovah who falsely poses as an absolute creator. And we're getting very Gnostic here as a kind of this false and vain creator of the world. Aligning with him in the game leads to the creation of the 1,000-year kingdom as well, after humanity has been expunged. And Lucifer very convincingly tries to say that he should be in charge instead and bring about like a world of liberation, libertine kind of existence. We will not study this too much, but this is not by me, but this is a fan-made thing which attempts to join up all of the games that exist in the series into one large continuity, and it is strongly implied that it is one sort of huge existing continuity. Another point that's kind of interesting about the game as well is that it would appear perhaps on the outside that, you know, that law and sort of bringing God's law, making it unbreakable, removes like humanity out of the equation, but chaos is just nuts. So it's like, where do you go with you? So you have to go neutral. But there is also a strong implication that neutrality in the game is sort of like, in a lot of ways, hitting the reset button. You are putting off this conflict until it just happens again. So neutrality is almost like, rather than being freedom, it's there is a possibility that it's simply cyclical as well. It's like, is there actually a good way out of this problem? Who knows? And again, just quickly winged in there is just, it's quite interesting that there's debates rage on in Reddit and other places where people kind of begin to develop these kind of nuanced understandings as well. It's something that's quite an interesting one. All of them suck, but neutral and law suck less. It seems to be a kind of fair point. So what's this other one? There are things in life worth struggling, suffering, and dying for. There are many things more important than equality of peace. You could, and I would argue, life without suffering and struggle wouldn't be life at all. We'd just be existing as mere sacks of flesh and bone. So junior, you know, theologians coming up through the ranks of the through the Japanese role-playing game. So time to wrap up or begin the descent anyway. The Shin Megami series is always set in Tokyo, but demons are drawn from global myth and religion. I mean, it's huge. The compendium of, you've got all of the Ars Goetia, you've got like all of the biblical characters. It's like biblical figures. It's everything. It's all rolled in. It's like Korean, Chinese, India. It's like lots of very interesting visual representations as well. A very obscure Irish mythological figures that there's actually very little of locally, but they've made like lovely images of them. The Kashyyyk is probably one of the more interesting examples of that. What's also interesting is that this is a Japanese game, but it does actually maintain that, like in some ways, that this structure is that's Abrahamic at the top and the bottom. So even it's not Japan getting like a special kind of privileged position here. It's like it's reinforcing a kind of a Christian position on this. There is a lot of Gnosticism here. Dualistic cosmology, Jehovah's demiurge, the hunt for pleroma. There is a later game called Shin Megami Tensei II in which Sophia, reckoned to be kind of the true architect of the universe, turns up much later into the story and kind of issues a friend to the player character of that particular game. And that one didn't come over in English, but it has kind of played with this before. I would argue that the position is largely Sethian Gnosticism, where the demiurge is bad, but Jung's neo-Gnosticism is there too. There is a game called Persona 4 as another spin-off, and there's additional content available to that game wherein you can actually just get lectures about, you know, the shadow and the archetypes. So it seems to be something that's like kind of hovering close to this. Question here, and that's the thing I'm going to end on now, which is why is this happening? And there's like, this is in media terms. This has come across a lot of different times. Final Fantasy VII, for instance, similarly has a false creator god. And in Final Fantasy VII's narrative, which I can expand on later in questions, it incorporates a lot of contemporary events into the framework and fabric of the story, like things that were happening in the past couple of years in Japan are now being kind of articulated in a mythological sense within the boundaries of the game itself. Neon Genesis Evangelion sort of deserves a reference as an anime in which, like, the in-world version of the Dead Sea Scrolls are being acted upon or enacted to bring about the apocalypse by mankind. So this is something that keeps turning up, this divination of the return to the end. Two real things here. So the lost decade is a big one. It's like big recession, 89, big earthquake, 1993, political corruption, political scandal. The former and previous cabinet were involved in an insider trading scam. So like a lot of loss of faith. The Shinrikyo, the sarin gas attacks on the subway in 1993. It was bad. The other side of this is the other possible influence of the Kyoto School, which is a post-war movement that sought to reconcile Buddhism and Christianity. I spoke to a theologian scholar about this before who was familiar with the series, and we had discussed about, like, I think it's the Kyoto School, and he said, like, I do too, but we're looking for the smoking gun and we don't have it. It's like there does seem to be this strong connection with this. It's a very intellectual reappraisal of like Western material into a Japanese idiom, especially through a Japanese video game, but we've not found it. And well, I think that's me. So thank you very much for your time. If you enjoyed it, thank you.